Okay. Hello, Rob. Sorry, my headphones. Hello, Roslyn. It's so nice to see you. I'm just wondering how you're doing today.
I'm doing pretty good, thank you. Nice and
Yeah,
cool outside today, so just kind of relaxing.
that's good. Yeah, it's been a relaxing day for me as well. So I'm really excited to have you on. So for yourself, you're a caregiver, and I'm really excited to hear about that role of a spousal caregiver and really what we can learn as professionals from you. So I'm wondering if we can get right started and if you could tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Um, when I look at the different things that make up Rosalyn, there's lots of things that make up Rosalyn, and this would just be kind of a few, but this might sound kind of quirky, but I'm me. Um, I'm curious, inquisitive. I love to meet new people and build friendships. I like to learn something new every day. And kind of related to that, I guess that's also part of my passion. Sometimes I find it hard to say what my passion is, but I really am passionate about people and connecting with others. And as I said, part of me is creating those new experiences. And sometimes it's just plain old doing nothing. um, as a as an education background, I was trained as a teacher, but I've always been really passionate about recreation and sport and aquatics. I see myself as a professional jack of all trades. Um, and that can be both from a professional point, like a paid perspective, or from a sort of volunteer perspective. Um, but part of what has brought me here today is my caregiving experiences. And as you've pointed out, caregiving, when you think of a professional caregiver, you often think of someone that's paid. But as a family caregiver, you kind of pick up you pick up your socks and you go with caregiving when it's needed. And oftentimes you don't even realize, or I know I don't, and having spoken to other people, you don't realize you're a caregiver for an awful long time. So yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell, I think.
That's awesome. I really appreciate you sharing that with me and with us. I think it's awesome that you really explain what traits and values explain yourself. I think that's great. Of explaining ourselves and what your passion is. That's so amazing of connecting with people. I'm wondering if as a caregiver you've ever had that connection in, say, a peer support as a caregiver and how that's played a role in your life.
Well, I have gone to a couple of support group meetings,
Mm-hmm.
um, but it was a place to connect, but it was very superficial in a sense. It wasn't an opportunity to build friendships because in my case, I felt like I was coming in on people that had been meeting for a long time, so they all knew each other and they were really good friends. So oftentimes I am the outsider coming in, but I don't actually ever go right into the middle of the circle, but rather I'm sort of on the outside, but kind of like I kind of know what's going on. And it's funny you say that because there was a fellow, like a man whose son was injured around the same time, I think, as my husband. And he just recently got back in touch with me. He found me on LinkedIn, he found me on Facebook. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't even remember that. So, I mean, I remember him, and I remembered his son. I don't remember the kid's name, but so it wasn't like a friendship per se, but there was a connection that was made long ago. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then having presented at some different conferences, I remember going to one and I met this woman who was just so excited to hear me speak because she is a caregiver as well. And she's like, it was just so nice to hear somebody put into words what I'm feeling. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh, okay. So that was in 2011. And then in 2016, I made a presentation at the same conference. And we were chatting, her and her husband and I were chatting. And we're like, well, I know you. And she's like, well, I know you. And we finally figured out that we had met 5 years earlier. Um, and so we've kept in touch. This time around, I got her, her phone number, I got her email. So we keep in touch. And she's always found that I guess I can put it into words more, um, what I'm feeling or what I'm doing or what's going on in comparison to her. but she just really appreciates the fact that there's someone there that understands. And I don't understand exactly what she's gone through. She doesn't understand exactly what I've gone through, but there's a mutual care and understanding that, okay, I'm not going to judge you. I don't know what you've gone through, but I know you've been through something that I've kind of walked a similar road. Mind you, she's had to deal with it longer. Um, but I think, in answer to a part of your question too, is that by by not necessarily making great friends within that, it's always really important for me to meet other people that are in a similar role and make sure that I can befriend them and let them know that I'm there to help if I can in any way possible.
Yeah, that's lovely. Yeah, I know, and it sounds like this resonates with you as well, but that normalization and validation of, wow, that's exactly what I was feeling too, and I thought I was alone is something that, echoes in my head when I'm going through something that I may feel is individualized. And for me, peer support has been really helpful in just being able to empathize and hear, it's probably a way different scenario, but just recognizing that, I'm human and this is a normal experience for someone going through that same thing. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing. And, in your introduction to yourself, you explained how recreation and sport have been really important to you in your life. So I'm wondering to you, what does meaningful recreation and leisure look like?
I jotted some notes down about meaningful recreation, and I think my list could go on and on and on. So I'll try and keep it really short. Um,
Yeah, I mean, expand if you want. I'm curious to hear.
okay. Well, I think uh, I think meaningful recreation and leisure started long ago when when my dad was helping to start a summer swim club in the town that we grew up in because there was no swimming pool.
Mhm.
And excuse me, and he took my brother, who is really athletic. Me, not so much. I was like the academic nerd kind of idea. Anyways, I asked my dad why he wasn't taking me, and I don't remember the answer, but he started to take me. And if you know what a house pool looks like, okay, they're not really big, but I was winded by the time I got like halfway across the width of the pool, not not the length, but the width. And I was pretty tall. Like I was probably like 5'8" at that point in time. I was like 13 or 13. I guess I was 13. But I stuck with swimming, and remember at a fun swim meet within our own club, this one lady told my mom. She said, "Well, don't you shouldn't make your daughter swim." And my mom's like, "We're not." So I was never really great at swimming, but it taught me so many life lessons. It actually helped me steer me in the way of like a recreation related type career. It helped me um, apply. It helped me in applying for positions, like not positions, but where to apply to go to school, um, things like that. But I just learned a lot of life lessons. As for someone to tell somebody that somebody had died, where I met some great friends that I mean, like I did. I met kind of great friends. We traveled like because we lived in northern BC. Our closest swim meet in the summer was an hour and a half away. Our closest meet in the winter was 3 hours away, and we traveled all the way to Prince Rupert, or no, sorry, not Prince, to Terrace and to Kitimat for swimming and for water polo. Traveled to Dawson Creek for summer club regionals. So saw a lot of those routes. And it's really funny because about 15 or 16 years ago, no, 15 years ago, I met somebody when my husband and I are involved with open water swimming in Vancouver. And we started chatting away. And sure enough, she was from Prince Rupert and I had grown up in Williams Lake. And all of a sudden we knew the same people and we played water polo. So it's just been a really great connection. Then found out that her mother-in-law was also one of my practicum supervisors when I was at university. Her mom is from the current area where I live now. So like lots and lots of connections. So there's always, and swimming has always been kind of a main part of it. That's actually where I met my husband playing water polo. So we were in the water. So I guess from that perspective, swimming has just been a main part of my life. And with the pandemic, I really haven't done a whole lot of it, but I think that's where my heart is within in the water. I'm much better in liquid ice than solid ice. I don't do well skating and figure skating or downhill skiing or cross country skiing. And so with that in mind, as I mentioned, I went into human performance and then switched to PE teaching. And I wasn't great in PE, but hey, I was pretty happy to get a D in track and field because I passed and I never had to take it again. But I think that's one of my strengths too, is that I'm willing to put myself in places where I'm not the best, where I'm kind of in the bottom of the heap. And then people think that I'm kind of like maybe a wimp or something, but it's actually, I've learned it's a strength of mine. So it was a challenge to get a degree in physical education, or a degree in education, but with a major in physical education.
Mhm.
And so as I look back and I like look now, I would say meaningful recreation leisure means something that is somewhere where I can be active and I can learn and again connect with people. I can see something new or a combination of any of the things that I've just mentioned.
Awesome. I love how much you shared, and I love that you shared about the multiple life lessons that swimming has taught you. You mentioned, connections and socializing and friends. You mentioned, those transferable skills that led you into employment, and then also just travel and being able to be comfortable in that beginner's position when you started learning and trying new things as a PE teacher. So that's so amazing. And I really appreciate you sharing that and really highlighting the factors of, not just professional in recreation therapy can see how there's all those life lessons and transferable skills in recreation, but really, everyone can see those skills being transferred into life after that. So thank you for sharing. Next, I really want to get into, caregiving and the role of the caregiver. So I'd love for you to share your story on how you became a caregiver, if you're comfortable with that.
Oh, I'm totally comfortable. I've gotten used to sharing the story. And
Mhm.
oftentimes if I'm making a presentation, I'll start with a once upon a time, but it's not like it's a start like your childhood story, but really it's my story from my point of view. So I'll take you back to July 14th, 1997. And I am using notes just so I can kind of keep on track here. It was early evening, and my husband and I were both coming home from work. We were living in Vancouver at the time, so Vancouver, close to Burnaby. And he was riding his bike from out by UBC, so University of British Columbia. And I was coming home from Burnaby. I returned home first and I phoned a friend. He finished talking on the phone, and I thought, it's kind of weird that he's not home. So I went outside and walked around the block to see if I could see him. No such luck. So I came back into the house and we had a message on our phone. So, okay, I'm dating myself a little bit, but we had the phone with the big like screen and the big blinking light, and the blinking light said that there was a message. So someone
Mhm.
had phoned. So I looked on the screen and oh, it was one of his workmates. It's like, oh, okay. So then I pushed the button or whatever I had to do to listen to the message. And it wasn't his workmate, but rather it was the general hospital calling saying, Mrs. Fast, this is the general hospital emergency calling. Your husband's been in a car. No, I mean a bike accident. Please call us. Now, have you ever tried calling an emergency room on a full moon? Doesn't work really well. And for some reason, when that happened, I thought, oh, well, a bike accident is not as serious as a car accident. Now, looking back, I would probably flip that. But
Mhm.
anyways, I called some friends and I headed to the hospital and I checked in with the triage nurse and I waited. About an hour and a half later, I went back up to the triage nurse and I just asked, and she said, "Oh, let's see if we can get you in to see your husband." So I was taken in, and he looked tired, and he was grumpy. um, and he said, "Let's go." And I said, "Well, don't you need to speak to the doctor?" And he said, "Well, there she goes," because she was walking down the hall, like away from him. So, in case you're wondering, I wasn't told anything. So I got to take him home, and I was sent out to get some ibuprofen. And so that July 14th, that particular July 14th was a Monday. So the next day, we both got up and we went to work. He took, because he couldn't ride his bike, he took the bus or the SkyTrain and then the bus. And I drove, and I was working for the BC or the Burnaby Summer Games, so provincial games, and they were 2 weeks away. So we were really busy. He went off to work, as I mentioned, and that's when he figured out things were really, really wrong. Um, he said that this task should have taken him 10 minutes, but after an hour and a half, he still couldn't figure out what was going on. So he left, probably came home and had a nap, if I'm not mistaken. But anyways, as a result of that, within the next couple of days, he called his general practitioner. And it wasn't until he saw his GP where he was diagnosed with a concussion and mild traumatic brain injury. He also called a physio, massage therapist, dialed a claim to report the accident, and he also called his aunt who had had brain injury experience. And I was actually excluded from all that was going on. And he's making decisions left, right, and center, signed on with a lawyer without including me as well. So that's when my life changed. At that point in time, I didn't really think I was a caregiver. I had no clue. I was planning on finishing at the Burnaby Summer Games in August when my contract was completed, and then I was going to put together our wedding albums because we had only been married 2 years. And well, I still put together my wedding albums, but life certainly changed after that. It probably wasn't until about 6 months. It was probably until about like March of the following year that I kind of got on the bandwagon and realized that I had to do something to help, and that I guess if I look back, that's probably when I really realized it was a caregiver. But again, still, I didn't really recognize that because even though he was injured, he was still usually walking, usually talking, and that kind of thing. So yeah.
Very interesting. I really appreciate you sharing that. I know sometimes it's hard to share your personal stories. And I guess just to add to that, since becoming a caregiver, has your life or your perspective of life changed and shifted? You said, in that first year was really you were just making sure they were okay. It didn't really click that you were in that caregiver role. So I'm wondering, from now, or from then till now, sorry, has there been any shifts in that caregiver role? And has there been any, perspective shifts in life?
I think I think for a perspective is that when like I said, I'm not working right now, but looking looking for work, but I have sort of big plans down the road, which I'll share later. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I'm very, very conscious of how on earth am I going to balance housework and me being not fit, but me being able to put my energy all towards work when I know I still have all this stuff to do at home. So
Mm-hmm.
that perspective is there. And I also think my perspective, I've always been somebody that likes to public speak, having grown up in 4-H and being in other organizations and having a dad that was like a Toastmasters and Kiwanis. I learned how to public speak. And I always wanted to be able to share my story with others. And I also want to walk alongside others to help them through so they don't go through what I went through. They can go through their own stuff. But if I've already experienced it, let me share my story with you so that you don't do the same thing that I did or what have you. So my perspective is really, it's changed in a lot of ways, but I've always wanted to be able to do that kind of thing because it helps in my healing. Even, so many years later, it still helps with my healing. And you asked another part of the question, and I don't actually remember what that was.
Yeah, that's okay. Um, I guess just has that role as a caregiver shifted or changed, from then when that accident initially happened until now? Has there been any changes?
So yes, I believe that the role has changed. It has changed and shifted. And
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like, the waves on the ocean. It kind of comes and it goes and comes and it goes, really depending on what he is doing from a work perspective, or if he's exercising or if he's active or it. So yes, it does, because when he works way too much, then I had to take on more of a role again. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I, I still have to remember that, like, I still have to remember that he's had an injury and he didn't necessarily always vocalize that. And so
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of ways, I often felt like an invisible caregiver. But I'm still kind of in that role, but it all comes down to like the ebbs and flows of the ocean, the ebbs and flows of the tide. And so I pick things up more, like I said, when he's working longer hours or working way too much. I may be supportive in a different way when he was training for triathlons. Um, but I'm kind of always looking at the big picture, and okay, here's the big picture. What do I need to do to break things down to make it manageable, whether it's manageable for me or manageable for him, to share how maybe we could manage this and that kind of thing. So yeah, really ebbs and flows like the tide.
Mhm. Yeah. Um, I guess another question that's coming up is, you know, as a caregiver, I know that you obviously want to care for your partner as much as possible. But another thing is, getting that additional support when needed. And um, I know for myself, even personally, being able to reach out and get support can be hard sometimes. So, um, do you have any advice for people who need some support or additional support as a caregiver or a caregiver role?
One thing that I did, I've often been told I have the gift of the gab.
Mhm.
So when I kind of got on board and like sort of 6 or 7 months later, I talked to anybody and I talked to everybody. Now I wasn't always expecting to get an answer, or like say coming up to you and saying, "Hey Adriana, do you know such and such?" And you go, "No, that wasn't my goal. My goal was to, you might be able to help me, but you might know somebody that just knows like the littlest tiny thing that could be
Mhm.
a wonderful spark for me." So I talk to anybody and I talk to everybody, to find people that could see my husband. So that would be my biggest thing is, don't be scared to get out there and advocate for you. Like, and I don't think I was doing it for me as much as I could have been, but
Mhm.
advocate for your loved one, and don't be scared to do that. Like, it's kind of like, if you look at a salesperson, somebody in sales, like it's all numbers based, right? Well,
Mhm.
same thing here. You could talk to 10 people and get 3 people that give you an answer, and one of those answers might be like the best thing you could have ever done for your loved one. um,
Mhm.
and so, yeah, you talked to 10 people. Well, you met 10 people potentially, 10 new people. You talked to people that you knew before, and so you're sharing your story with them so that they can kind of get an idea, which a lot of times people may not, but you're getting the word out there. So I think it's really important to not be scared to ask for help. And if I go back in my own life, um,
Mhm.
I was born with an eye condition that I didn't actually know about till I was in my 20s when I went to get my driver's license, and it's called aniridia. And I think that eye condition, even before I knew I had it, um, caused me to be really inquisitive, to ask a lot of
Mhm.
questions, and to have a really good memory. So that was probably like, people go, "Oh, I have something wrong with my eyes. I'm not perfect." Well, none of us are perfect, but I think that helped me, jump the gun and go talk to people. And I guess the other thing is, if you want to, you have to be on the offense versus the defense. Because if you're on the defense and say you've had a car accident and you're waiting for the insurance company to say, "Hey, here's somebody you can go and see," well, you could be waiting until the cows have come home 10 times before you get the answers you want. So you really have to be on the offense. And I don't mean like, but be on the offense. You got to look for those things. You got to look for those opportunities. And somebody often has told me that my brain is like a Facebook database. And so I'm like always trying to connect things. And I guess it's like, just try and connect. You don't have to be perfect, because you'll get better as the days go on. But if you keep saying, "Oh no, I didn't say that quite properly, I can't say that," you're not going to get anywhere to help your loved one. And if you start talking to people, they may jump on the bandwagon with you and help you. Um, so I think those are some really important things to consider, and really, you know and I guess the other thing would be to, um, you can always say no. Like, you can always go to a support group and then go, "No, I'm not interested," or they give it 3 times and, "No, I'm not interested." But you really want to find people that are proactive versus like, "Oh, woe is me." You
Mhm.
really want that proactive approach,
Mhm.
to get your answers. And really, don't be scared to ask for help. Like, everybody's human, and it shows your strength that you're willing to ask for help.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing all of that. And I love that, you know, advocating for your partner has been such a large portion of this journey. And I love that, you're still, obviously, you can see that you're still so passionate about that. I also love that you explained how you really shifted your strengths. So, you know, you may not be you may not have the best vision, but you have the best mind. You're able to see that as a strength. So I think that's so beautiful. And, focusing on that good and focusing on your strengths and really running with that. That's awesome. And on a very similar topic, um, for many caregivers out there, what would you have told your previous caregiver self? So when you first started becoming a caregiver and, advocating for this, what are some insights that you would tell someone who's either, just starting their journey as a caregiver, halfway through caregiving, or not halfway through, but have caregived for a long time? Yeah, what are some insights that you have from that?
So thinking about that question, I wrote a couple of notes down here. And so having said that I grew up swimming, I said,
Mm-hmm.
looking back at my experiences, if you being a younger version of myself, if you think
Mm-hmm.
back to your competitive swim days, or think of this experience as an ultra marathon, one needs to go slow and steady to run the whole thing, and various supporters step in at different times to help. You'll
Mm-hmm.
have a couple of friends who'll always be friends, but you'll lose lots of friends along the way. Um, and in your case, your parents are incredible cheerleaders, and you've made some good friends. Oh, sorry, you may also have some good friends and family members pass away too. But
Mm-hmm.
regardless, soldier on, um, look after yourself, and give yourself time to grieve, to regroup, use your persistence and use your determination and faith in God to anchor yourself, and ask for help and be that beacon of hope for yourself and others around. You will be strengthened in who you are, and this experience will put a spotlight on your many strengths and skills that will bring forth your character.
That's so beautifully spoken. I love that you use that analogy of a marathon because you're so right. Of you have to go slow and steady, and you may have to get support along the way. Yeah, I couldn't have put any of those words better myself. That's so amazing. I appreciate you sharing.
Thanks.
Um, you're welcome. You really touched on um, taking care of yourself. And that's one component that I think is really important in that caregiver role. So I'm wondering, how has your personal care and quality of life played a role in your own life and ensuring balance as a caregiver?
I don't think it was always really balanced,
Mhm.
to be to be quite honest. But
That's okay.
when I look at, let's say, the last 5 or 6 years, I'm not sure if I mentioned, but I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which often can come on from stress. Well, hello, that would be one thing. But especially just with some other experiences, I realized I was giving, and not really getting any support.
Mhm.
So going back to swimming, I reached back into my lifeguard training for this analogy, and it's really helped me. Sometimes I remember it, sometimes I could do to remember it more. But as a lifeguard, you're a trained professional who has passed their NLS, it's the National Lifeguard Service. They're trained, as I said, they're trained professionals. And when the whistle blows and you go in, you know that you have someone right behind you, otherwise known as they have your back, and vice versa. If you hear the whistle go, you know you need to get to the side of the pool, and whether you get in or whether you wait for your partner to come back with the injured person. But when you have your bronze cross and you're in a lifeguarding role, it's a really different mentality. So if you want to save someone first, you need to make sure you are safe as you approach the person in distress. You most likely are on your own, and there's no point in having two people in distress. So what I've learned, when I didn't necessarily have any support in a caregiver in this caregiving role, because it might be a profession that's kind of a family profession, but it's not like I'm not trained as a caregiver. Um, So when I realized I didn't really have the support, I needed to look after myself versus putting myself all out there, because otherwise I would empty my emotional tank. And I've learned that I always need a reserve. And this has come like, 15, 20 years after the accident itself. So
Mhm.
that would be, I guess, my little gem of wisdom.
Yes, that's awesome. What things do you tend to do that fill your tank and make sure that you can re-energize and recharge after a long day or a long night?
Um, I find that if I take that time after he's gone to bed, whether I'm just reading in another room in kind of it's not always neat and tidy, but in kind of a comfy atmosphere. So whether I'm reading or whether I'm just doing some physio exercises, or like literally, as I said earlier in this, that just doing nothing. I'm really
Mhm.
good at doing nothing sometimes, actually quite often, but um, doing that kind of thing. And especially with the whole pandemic and everything, I do really enjoy just getting outside and going for a walk. I've had seen physiotherapists for a long time, and things are starting to come all together for me. So going for
Mhm.
a nice walk, whether it's 20 minutes or whether it's an hour, I'm just listening to the birds or trying to say hello to people as you
Mhm.
walk, or that kind of thing. So those are some of the things, and actually just trying to connect with friends as well, like the good friends that have been around for years and years and years. So,
Mm.
yeah.
That's awesome. Well, even though it's been a long journey, I'm glad that you have come to that realization and that self awareness of needing to recharge your tank. And as professionals in a recreation sense, or really just as a broad sense, how, as professionals, can we support someone who is a caregiver?
I huh. So I think that there's a couple of things, but I think that as a professional, um, as a professional, and for someone that is in a caregiving role, is one, you as a professional need to learn to take time for yourself during a tumultuous time, because it's crucial for healing and for retrospection. But at the
Mhm.
same time, once you've done that, you have a much better appeal, you have a much stronger say when you're talking to a caregiver. Like, take some time for yourself. This is what I do to help me. And I have 6 kids running around, or I'm busy working doing this. This is what you're doing, and this is why it's really helpful if you can take some time for yourself. And might only be 5 minutes sitting on the toilet. It might be only 2 minutes before you just fall into bed, but just taking that time to learn how to breathe, learn how to to count your blessings, um, any of those kind of things, just to say, you know what, I'm important enough to take some of this time. And I think whether you're the professional or whether you're the caregiver, especially during this pandemic, taking that time is crucial for from a mental health perspective. And then as a professional, I just urge you to be passionate in your chosen field, whatever you do. And create an atmosphere of connecting with that uninjured spouse, helping them on their journey so he or she can be the best lifesaver for their loved one. And I say passionate in whatever field you're in, because you don't know when you're going to bump into somebody, but just to have the heart to ask them how they're doing, and not just like, how are you? I'm fine. But if you can share some of your personal experience to get them to open up. Like, as an example, I think I was working, or I was giving a presentation, and I knew that this couple I knew that he had had an accident. And so I said to them, I said, "Well, hi, how are you doing?" "Oh, we're fine." Something like that. And they said, "Oh, well, my husband had a bike accident and suffered a brain injury concussion." So as soon as I said that, all of a sudden this other lady started to share how she was doing and how he was doing. So if you can find some common ground, it's really important to create that safe space for that spouse to start talking about how they're feeling and what's going on.
Yeah, I think that's so important as well. I know just recently, I think either last week or the week before, um, I shared with one of my participants in one of my recreation groups that, I've dealt with trauma too, and that's like a hard topic to talk about. And I didn't have to go into any detail. I just had to mention that I've gone through trauma too. I've been there, and I know for me that was a really tough place. And by opening up, I feel like it really normalizes and validates their experience. They no longer feel alone in that and can really open up and feel more supported and connected. I agree.
Definitely. Sorry, definitely.
Yeah, that's okay. Um, so a few other things that you mentioned was really just, you know, how we just mentioned of being able to have that connecting ground to work on and, really to open up about our lived experience as well. I think sometimes we put on the professional cap and we're like, oh, we have to build all these barriers around and we can't open up about our own experience. And not like I'm going to open up and you're going to be my therapist, but really being able to have that common ground is so important and really, like I said, normalizes my own experience and theirs at the same time. So I think it just builds a lot more trust in that relationship too. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yes. Awesome. Um, so being a caregiver and being a caregiver for as long as you have, I can imagine that burnout and maybe compassion fatigue is something that you had to deal with. So in that time, how have you overcome that? And, you know, what things do you look at now and realize that you could have maybe prevented burnout or reached out for support in that time?
I kind of have to think about that.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a deep question, a long question to uncover for sure.
I think in a lot of ways, a lot of those have been answered, haven't been answered in the other questions that you've asked. And
Hmm.
I really think it's important to keep your emotional tank. I recognize that you have an emotional gas tank and that you have to keep that emotional gas tank. Like some people might be able to go on a quarter of a tank all the time, but being in a role such as this, I think the emotional gas tank has to be more full. So at least like half, at least half full. And you have to find ways to fill it. So, it might just be lying in bed listening to the birds chirp at 4:30 in the morning or, 6 o'clock in the morning. It might just be rolling over and going back to sleep or, just lying in bed without going to sleep. Doing that, uh, doing that nothing. And I think I mentioned earlier that, it took a long time for me to realize I didn't need to be busy. Um,
Hmm.
and I hear so many people, oh, I'm just stupid busy, I'm crazy busy. And I'm like, and why? Like, what is so important that you're always so stupid busy that you can't connect with a friend kind of idea? Um, so I guess it really, it's a journey and it's no one certain thing, but I think you start to find other people that you connect with that we talked about, like having common ground,
Hmm.
just connecting with other people. And I think a chunk of it for me has been also presenting my story and presenting my story and depending on who I'm talking to, like presenting the story and here's things that I would recommend for you, or here's like role play that we could do as a recreational therapist. Um, but and even doing them virtually because I had never thought about that before. So just being willing to put myself out there and share the story. And I think one of the funny things is that my husband doesn't really realize how many people would like to hear his story or why my story might actually be important. Um, I wish I could get him to share his story or share his side of the story so that he would realize how much valuable information he has. Um,
Hmm.
and I guess I mentioned I had aniridia before. I still do, but for a long time I couldn't read because I had to have cataract surgery. And I think just being able to read a book again is, in the last 10 years or so has been really beneficial as well. Um, and to this day, I still look at things and still wonder, would that be like beneficial to help him like where we are now? Um, when we had a court case, it wasn't until then that the lawyer realized that most of the people that he had gone to see were because of me. So part of helping him, part of helping him was helping me because I was using my skills and my strengths. Like I may not be teaching, I've only taught a couple of years, but I think my teaching degree is a communication degree. And
Hmm.
so I was communicating with people to try and get the help needed. So I actually found about 73% of the people that he saw. Um, and still to this day, I might go see somebody before he sees them, but then, oh yeah, maybe you like this person, so maybe you should go and see them, that kind of thing. He's done that for me as well. But um, yeah, I guess those are just sort of some of the things that I really think of.
Yeah, I just want to touch on a few things that you talked about of, it'd be really great to hear, your husband's point of view. I completely agree. And I also think that I know for myself, even with creating this podcast, there was a lot of self-doubt of, is my story even important? Am I bringing enough to the table? And yeah, I think as I grow older, which I'm still very young, I'm still in my early 20s, but as I mature, I want to say, um, I find that the more I open up about my personal experience, the more I can relate to people and really build those connections. So I love that you've used that throughout your journey as a caregiver to help others. And I think that's so important and beautiful that you've done that.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Now, to tie really our two conversations together. So I often talk about recreation and leisure, and you talk about caregiving. So I really want to talk about the intersection between these. So, how does recreation and leisure play a part in your personal life and role as a caregiver? And, like you were mentioning about filling your tank, how does it fill your tank?
Um, I wish I had more time for recreational leisure pursuits. But I mentioned earlier that I really enjoy reading before I go to bed and getting out for a walk. But as a caregiver, I felt like, especially in that first year, when we were in the swimming pool, that was the only place he was listening to me. So that real connection was between me and, oh, sorry, I say the connection between recreational leisure and caregiving that's where he listened to me. And another
Mhm.
example I have is he got a membership at the YWCA when he went back to work, and he started swimming with this group of people. And I'd ask, they'd write out these swim workouts. None of them had been in the swim club. One of them had been in a swim club. But I had said, oh, so what'd you do? Well, I don't know. So like, how long did it take you to swim 200 meters? Well, I don't know. And I was like, okay. So, you know, like, I don't know, a week, 2 weeks later, and because his memory was definitely impacted by this injury, and it still to this day is like, I could say something now and 5-10 minutes later, it's like, I don't know where it's gone. It's where it's gone. But this couple of weeks later, even maybe a month later or so, he said, oh, I did 200 freestyles. And I'm like, oh. And they were like 310, 308, 302, 259, 255. And I'm like, oh, so he'd actually started to remember what he did. And then,
Mhm.
and pardon me, and then it was what he actually did for the entire workout, not necessarily all the time. It's about like all of the exercises, or like all of the workouts that made up the big workout. And so then I knew his memory was starting to improve as well. But it
Mhm.
was because I just asked that question, and he was angry. He really was like, ugh, ugh, kind of idea. But as he became more confident in his ability to use his memory, he was much calmer about it, and he could just share what he did and all that kind of thing as well.
That's
So
awesome.
the swimming pool was the connecting place.
Mhm. I love that that is one of the strengths that you've picked up on. And it sounds like really utilized in your caregiving and connection and relationship journey. Something that we talk about lots in recreation is a strength based approach. So recognizing and focusing on their strengths instead of, those deficits that they may face.
Yeah,
Um, so I am wondering, how has this played a role and, what strengths have you seen in your partner?
strength. Oh, well, he is I forgot to mention this, but he's an engineer by trade, so his brain is already wired differently than mine. I often talk to a couple of friends and figure we need like a spousal support group for spouses that are engineers. um, but Yeah, I mean, his strengths include his desire to be more active, and unfortunately, because he's worked so hard in the last couple of years, he's not been so active. And he's definitely a much better cook than a cleaner upper. But
Hmm.
I think you also have to. I know you always work on your strengths, but I think you have to know where your weaknesses are to work on them a little bit, like washing
Hmm.
dishes. I am so
Yeah.
tired of washing dishes. I can tell you, like, oh my, and I have a dishwasher, but I'm still washing dishes.
Yeah.
Um, and so when I think about that, like, yeah, even say driving the car, like he knows when he gets tired that he shouldn't drive. So if we're going somewhere, who's driving? And oftentimes he'll go, well, I'll drive because you can drive home.
Hmm.
So um, giving sort of that, that leeway. Um, and I know he's like a little inventor and he's a little creator, and I guess tiring sort of cleaning up these little messes here and there. Uh, and he has to kind of learn how to do that. But I mean, I do like the fact that he's creative, and because things have changed work-wise for him, he's much more energetic and more. He's kind of has compared himself to Tigger with Winnie the Pooh. It's like he's got more of that, more of that again as well. But yeah, I think like knowing that he likes to cook and do engineering kind of things. And I guess the other big one for him is he's really into board games. So
Hmm.
I know that's really important to him, but it's really hard to play board games right now when you can't have people over. You can't really go over to people's places, but he's playing online with friends. And I know that's important. Sometimes it gets a bit much, but it's really important to him as well. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's awesome. I love that you shared his strengths and then also shared the challenges that come with strengths because, as a caregiver, I think it's awesome that you do get to support him in doing those strengths. And because you're a caregiver, you're also helping with those. I also love that, you are supporting him in doing those passions and continuing to find meaning in life. Um, and, you know, continuing the conversation with that of obviously you've had so much wisdom and things you've learned over the years as a caregiver. So I'm wondering if you have any words of wisdom that you want to share with other caregivers out there who are trying to support their loved one.
So I wrote down something while you were talking about something else, and I totally forgot about it.
Hmm.
And then I realized I have some other comments, so they're kind of like jumping around. Um,
Oh, okay.
but so there's a couple things, and I know it's probably like hitting the hammer on the nail more than once, but make sure that you can learn how to ask for help. Like really ask for help. Like don't be like, I don't know how to do that. Figure it out or ask somebody, but ask for help. And
Yeah.
don't allow yourself to be pushed around. Um, but still keep a positive mindset. And as an example, we all know how people can get really riled up on Facebook or other social media. And it has always been my goal since I started on Facebook that anything that I ever post is positive, and that
Hmm.
when I answer somebody or make a comment on someone else's post, that there's always it's always positive. There's not like, well, rah, 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 rah. It's not that, and it's not that I'm always positive, but it just keeps me in check. So that's kind of what I mean. Um, and I think another thing that's, you're gonna laugh at this, and that's okay. Um, but I often felt like I was Snow White living with the seven dwarfs. And I actually bought Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs from the Disney store. They have the 12-inch, I guess, I don't know. So they're sitting on my cedar chest in my bedroom. And you might be wondering why. But as a caregiver, you kind of got to figure out what kind of mood they're in at different times of the day, like so you know whether to talk to them or not or what to do. So I call it like the informal Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs checklist. And often caregivers don't really know that they actually have useful information that they can share with professionals. But like, is your loved one like dopey, as in tired, or bashful for whatever reason, sneezy, happy? Okay, I'm not going to remember all of these guys. Uh, is he a doc, which is like Mr. Fix-It or telling you what to do all the time? Or is he grumpy? And I have forgotten one. Who the heck have I forgotten? sleepy. Oh, sleepy, sleepy. He's always sleepy. Yeah, sleepy. So, but if I know I'm talking to Grumpy or Doc, sometimes I have to remember. I don't always remember, but sometimes okay, I have to do it. I have to do it a little bit differently. And I don't always remember, trust me. But I think it's a great checklist for like recreational therapists to use with their clients, but even also with the caregivers, because you can ask the caregiver, so whatever, Lizzie, Doc, whatever, and it really does provide a lot of information, because you as a rec therapist can go, I'm not touching him with a 10-foot pole today, so we'll just do something like this, we'll get him involved in something like this, versus engaging really with him, because you know that he's just going to be spouting off at you or something, or whatever. But it just gives you an idea of how you can approach the person, at least at the beginning of the session.
Yes, for sure. Something that we talk about very close along those lines is person-centered care or person-centered approach. So putting the person in the center of their care. And I think this can go a step further of, everyone's going to have their unique moods and personalities from day to day, hour to hour, um, that are unique to them. And I know previously, talking with another professional, of sharing how we have to individualize our services for each individual, but also each individual in each moment. And so coming to them and meeting them where they're at, depending on if they are sleepy, if they are drowsy, if they may be grumpy. And really meeting them and tailoring how we care for them like you do, um, depending on how they're feeling. And yeah, I think that's such a great analogy. Um, and I loved how you shared the Facebook story, because I think, yeah, you never really know. And especially now as a caregiver, and I'm sure, from advocating for that, you've probably heard a lot of different stories, and how everyone, you know, behind whatever they're going through or what they're putting out to the world is going through something. So having that positive light and, you know, trying to not nitpick, I guess you would say, other people's stories, because truly, even with my friends, maybe something happened and I didn't know that, a family member isn't talking to them, or a friend um, isn't talking to them, or something happened. So, really, meeting them where they're at, and then also recognizing that every day they may be coming there with a new story. And so tailoring our services to that for sure.
Definitely.
Yes. Awesome. So in closing, before we kind of give some recommendations, do you have any last words of wisdom or thoughts that you'd like to share with anyone?
So I guess there's a couple of quotes, if I
Mm-hmm.
heard you correctly. There's a couple of quotes that I found. Sorry, a quote I found, and I think actually this is something that I came up with. So I think it's just really important to know that caregivers go through more than they'll ever tell you, and they give up a lot and rarely have a social life. They can get sick and emotionally worn out. It's a lot for one person, and you'll never know until you have walked the road of a caregiver. So I think it's really important to reach out to that person and have the mindset of, I want to learn more about you. I want to learn more about you as a person.
Mm-hmm.
Caregiving is part of you, but I want to know more about you. And it's something that I wrote, I think it was for one of the first or second presentations I made, was caregivers are often backstage working to help the star performers, the people who have sustained a traumatic brain injury, shine. And therefore, you really don't know what they're going through, as I said in that first quote. So um, I think that those are the things that I would say, leaving with from this podcast. That, like you said, people just really, you don't really know what people are going through, and just have an open ear, and an open heart to hear the story.
Yeah, I love both of those quotes, and I think it really echoes the thoughts of empathy and compassion, and how, when there is an individual that's coming to our services, we should also check in with that caregiver and see if we can do anything or support them in any way. Um, like you said, often you're working so hard to make sure they're presentable, they're okay. And sometimes you're the one who may need support that day. So, really having that open ear and um, being able to take that time to listen is so important. So, thank you so much. And as we close out, do you have any recommendations you'd like to share anyone to continue their understanding on the role of a caregiver?
Hmm. Well, I don't know if this is the answer to your question,
Mhm.
um, but these are things that I want to do and I'm working towards doing. I want to create a business using my caregiving experiences as the basis. Um,
Mhm.
and it's kind of coming together from different angles. And I want to create, I want to use my caregiving experiences to create an opportunity to come alongside others who are in a similar situation. And I want to reach out to those in the greater community, not just the city I live in, but I'm like a big picture thinker. So I want to make this global, not just like Southwestern Ontario, but I want to make this global because I think there's different groups of people that are impacted by brain injury in different ways. Um, I also want to create a foundation. That may not be the right word, but I want to create a foundation within this business to honor my dad, because
Mhm.
he, as I mentioned, he was one of the big cheerleaders and when it came to brain injury and helping. And he unfortunately passed away. It'll be 4 years ago this coming Thursday, I think. Um, but he was always really, really concerned about my mom as a caregiver because she was the caregiver for my dad. And he was also on a mental health board for child and youth. And I think that he had a really soft spot for mental health. Um, and his concern for others was really a driving force in his life. And 2 weeks prior to him um, passing away, he was still working on helping his sister, trying to get his sister to move into a home because she had mild cognitive decline. So I know that there's a lot of people out there that cannot always afford things. So I'd like to be able to start this kind of foundation to really kind of mesh those things in. But at the same time, I want to create a business using my experiences to one to like help other people and assisting them on their journey, providing in-person or distant Jikun and Reiki as a Jikun and Reiki practitioner to
Mhm.
help caregivers with their own relaxing and care. And then I also would like to be at the table with insurance companies because a lot of these things happen as a result of accidents where insurance is involved. And I want to be at that table and I want to make a case for why they need to change personal settlements or whatever you want to call them, change how they pay out settlements to include the caregiver.
Mhm.
Because when they use the word, and I would also like them to get rid of the word mild, because a brain injury, as I often say, a brain injury is a brain injury is a brain injury, and um, you can. I just lost my train of thought. You can like you use the terms mild, moderate, and severe, pretty much at the time of. But every brain injury, every person, just like person-centered care, every person is different. They all respond to their brain injuries in different ways. So, you know, from day one, oh, he has a mild one because he can walk and talk and looks normal. Well, yeah, if you look at some of the tests, he's not where he was prior to the accident. So I
Mhm.
really want to get rid of that word mild because it doesn't dictate what's going to happen 10 or 15 years or 20 years down the road. Um, so those are a couple things that I want to do, and I do love presenting. So I love to be able to present on my experiences and maybe even be a keynote speaker um, outside of the brain injury world. But I believe that my experiences speak to other areas as well, because I'm sure there's an awful lot of people. Haven't looked at the research, but I'm sure there's a lot of people caregiving that are having to work full time as well.
Mhm.
So um, those are some of the things that I can think of. And I guess the other thing is that um, a, a brain injury, as I said, is a brain injury. But when you have someone that you love unconditionally, um, it again, it ebbs and flows, and brain injury is not the same one day to the next. So it can often be a really stressful and anxious time in people's lives as well.
Yeah. I think that really speaks to your passion, and I think you bringing your lived experience there and then your passion with your dad as well would make such a beautiful, business as well as a foundation of how you can really better support and, advocate for not only your loved one, but other loved ones among the community. So thank you so much. And I'm wondering, if anyone was interested in getting a hold of you, where they would get a hold of you at.
Well, I can share my information with you as well that you can put on your podcast stuff. But by all means, you can look at my email would be rosalynfast@gmail.com. So that's ROSALYN, and then F is in Frank, A is in Apple, S is in Sam, T is in Tom @gmail.com. You won't find many other Rosalind Fasts around, so you would probably also find me on Facebook, but I would strongly recommend LinkedIn as well, which I can provide you the LinkedIn comment as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you for sharing your story and really giving us a lens into the caregiver role so that we can really better empathize and support you in the future.
Well,
So
thank
thank
you.
you.
And if I can be of any assistance, by all means, let me know.
Yes, awesome. Thank you so much.